I think for me, the first inkling that I was socially excluded was when I became very ill with my last child, my fifth child. I was very unwell during the pregnancy and I had a really poor postnatal depression. I hadn't really felt that I was excluded up until that point, when I almost hit a barrier. Here I was, I had really poor mental health. I had a very tiny child, I had 4 other children at home. I had no prospects, I had not very good qualifications. I'd always worked in very low paid jobs, usually dragging the children around with me, cleaning, bar work, that sort of thing. I was a single parent. I had no family support locally. I was unable to drive for a period of time. In fact, at one point, I was unable to take one of my children to school. The DVLA had suspended my driving licence because of the effects of medication. So at this point, on several levels, I was, I think, completely socially excluded. I think it had a devastating effect on my family. Although I did try, 2 of my children ended up in short-term foster care. During my periods in hospital, I didn't see my children. My children didn't get to school. My children didn't eat properly. There was a whole heap of money troubles at the time. My own journey began, I think, with a realisation when I was actually in hospital that I'd probably hit the bottom and the only way was up. And it really was a realisation as I stood there thinking, I can't continue like this. And I think it was a combination of factors that helped me. I had support from the community mental health teams. I became involved in a local mind project, which really was my lifeline. I was able to attend a training project, and at that training project I was able to gain a meaningful qualification. When I say meaningful, it was an IT qualification, and it was a qualification that was being used in schools and colleges, and I felt really quite proud about that. I think I was very lucky in my journey in the fact that I did have this opportunity to attend this training project at mine, whilst still having some support from the community mental health team, because what that enabled me to do was to log in to other potential partners, i.e. the local college. I was able to volunteer. Volunteering, as everybody knows, raises your self-esteem, and I found myself in the position of actually helping other people that had come through and were going through a similar journey to myself. I actually found myself becoming a volunteer tutor, and I think at this point was another step in my journey, another realisation that there actually was something beyond this, and that if I was prepared to step outside of my comfort zone, that I could actually move this journey on a pace. I was able to go on to the local college, who were aware that I'd been unwell and therefore had put in some steps to support me, and I was able to do a teacher trainer diploma in ICT skills, and this was my first real teaching qualification and probably the one that had the most impact on my life. So here I was really working with the community mental health team. I had a support worker, I had great support from a local voluntary organisation and great support from a local college, but all working towards making me feel more included. It was decided I would go on and do my certificate in education, which was a great big jump because this was not something that I could undertake lightly. I actually passed my certificate of education and I was able to do a bit of work at the local college, and again this was a marvellous thing for me to do. I was given the opportunity to work a few hours, 17 hours a week, at the Mind project as a paid tutor, and I actually had to undergo a proper interview process for that, and again that was something that was a real eye-opener for me. I was lucky, I did get the job, and things progressed on from there. Eventually I went on to work full-time for the project. I had to go up in front of a panel of people from social services, and I did get that job under my own steam. So in terms of learning, it's been a complex and complicated journey, but I couldn't have done it on my own. To feel entirely socially included, you really do need this multi-layered, multi-faceted approach. And when I got to that point in my journey where I was working full-time, I was bringing home a pay packet, I was doing a meaningful job, I had gone from being someone who was almost, well, what I considered myself almost a victim, to someone who had some standing in the community. I'd started paying taxes, and interestingly enough, and people will laugh, I was actually quite pleased to do that. I started paying back my student loan. I started feeling that I was no longer a drain on society, but I was able to really give something back in the wider sense. People came and asked my opinion on things. I started to feel a much more whole person. And of course, if you start feeling that as an individual, then society as a whole starts benefiting. I think if somebody had said to me, oh, in 15 years' time, you will be sat here with a master's, holding down a very responsible job, I'd have said no, impossible. It's about taking small, realistic steps to become included again. Nobody can do it on their own, and it has to be a combination of factors, a combination of social services, voluntary sector, learning organisations, and key individuals working together, believing in you. There has to be a self-belief as well that you can do it, but that has to be nurtured by various people. Social exclusion at its worst meant an isolation from everyone and everything that ever gave me any sort of joy and hope and motivation in life. I just became a patient who took medication. I was not interacting in any sense with wider society. I had no hope. I could see no future. And that's not just mental ill health talking here. That is that I could not see a path through this almost like trap that I got into. If you take into account poor health, whether it be mental or physical health, poor housing, single parent, trapped on a low income, never being really given any hope or any expectation of being able to move anywhere, then we will end up with a society of people that do feel mutually excluded, because the strength of the individual at the end of the day is the strength of society. I don't think that poverty and social exclusion are necessarily mutually exclusive. I don't think there is any one thing that particularly excludes people. I think it is a combination of things, and I think it varies as well from person to person. Obviously, being where I am today has had a positive impact on my family, not just myself. All of my 5 lads have grown up to be very self-sustaining and I would say contributing members of society, because I am able to work full-time, because they no longer see a mother who is excluded, because I have a certain status in my local community. This reflects well for them, and it means that they have a much more balanced and a much better start at life, and as a result they've gone on and been quite successful in their own chosen career paths. The most important and key points for me throughout my learning journey was the ability for people who were working with me to think in a very joined up way. My journey would have been very different if multi-agencies had not worked together. I also think it's important that key people within these agencies, whether it be a college or a voluntary organisation or social services or anyone else, offer that individual the right support at the right time. It's no good just throwing heaps of money at people if it's not tailored and the right support is not in there at the time. For me, that combination of people working together enabled me to start to become self-sufficient. Once I was given my own tools, I could then go off and do my own job. Okay, so my story is only one example of how poverty and exclusion can be combated. through agencies working together, through the education system, through the journey which involves learning. And I am a great believer in giving people the tools to help themselves, and that's what's happened to me most of the time throughout this learning journey. It would be unfair of me to sit here and say that I think everybody will follow the same journey as me, and that's not what we want. To be a truly inclusive society, we need to be able to give people the tools to help themselves, the ability to obtain what they want to obtain in life. We don't want to squash people's aspirations. We want to be able to work with that. We want to be able to enable them, everybody, to become part of a wider society. And I think for me personally, it's almost like the closing of a circle. I started off really not giving very much at all, being very, very excluded, being very, very isolated. And now I've come full circle and I'm able to give back to my local community, and it feels good.